All right. So, welcome everyone. Let me share my screen. Today, I'm going to give you a quick overview of where we are at with Geo, and I'm also going to highlight some of the specific items for 12.3, which is the release for the 22nd of September. So what I'll do is I'll walk you through the roadmap, and then I'll highlight a few specific items that I think are valuable for you as our users to actually have a deeper understanding of, but I'll also give you a broader context of what is happening. So the first thing to know is that this is the Geo roadmap at the moment. It is labeled with the group Geo label, and it is all the epics that we believe are required to be finished up to increase the category maturity for both geo-replication and for disaster recovery from minimal to viable. So this is not all epics that exist. It is those that we have already grouped into a maturity level. And so I'll walk you through those. If you're interested in actually understanding a little bit more why we believe these epics are important and how they fit into our longer term strategy, you can also check out the category strategy for geo-replication here. It gives you an overview of our roadmap, where we're headed, what's next, what we're thinking about. And I'll try to keep this one updated so that it's always pointing to the right things. The same for the category strategy for disaster recovery. Just have a read. They're quite informative. But back to the roadmap. So the first thing that I quickly wanted to highlight is dog fooding is really important to GitLab. And the Geo team is continuously supporting our infrastructure engineering to enable and further Geo use at gitlab.com. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but this is an ongoing effort, and we still have a little bit of work to do in order to actually enable all parts of Geo on gitlab.com. But that is the top item, and I'll probably have a few updates on this for another release. The second thing is Geo verifying all replicated data. And you can see we are working on this right now, and there are actually some deliverable items for the 12.2 release, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about 12.3. So why would anybody care about verifying replicated data? I think here it's really important to highlight that Geo replicates data from a primary to a secondary, and we need to ensure that the data integrity for those data is actually, really there. And there's still a little bit of work for us to actually make sure that the data is correctly verified, that we really are certain that what was transferred is correct. So if we go into this a little bit more in detail, what we're doing right now, so for 12.2 is actually, if you look at this table of all the different data types that are currently produced by GitLab, we're focusing on uploads, LFS objects, CI job artifacts, where the data is already verified on transfer. That's something we did very recently, but there's still work to do. That's happening in 12.2. At the moment, all of this is manual. And so if you look at the long list of items here that we are working on, the next step is the automation of verification for those parts. So this is one item that I wanted to quickly highlight. So this is something that we will do for 12.3, where we're actually looking at ensuring that all the necessary verification steps are properly automated. So it's really a follow-up, another iteration on what we're doing in 12.2. And this is one of the items I wanted to highlight here. And ultimately, if you look at the epic here, we obviously want to be in a position where every data type that we replicate is verified, that this becomes a natural part of adding new data types as well. And I'll talk about that in a second for another epic. But this is that bit. So that covers the verification here. So for the 22nd of September, 12.3, we look at automation. And you'll see that in the release doc as well. The next item here is automatically choosing the Geo node for the best user experience. And this is actually something that I'm really excited about. I did a little bit of user research already. I work very closely with one of our engineers on understanding what we can do to actually make the user experience for Geo a little bit better. And one of the pain points that was highlighted is, if we go look at this in detail, is that for many of our customers who use Geo, they may have more than one secondary. And at that point, from a sort of systems administrative perspective, one of the issues is that they then are in a position where they have to maintain several different URLs for their Git configurations. So for example, us.example.com, EU, and so on and so forth. And that gets quite cumbersome if you have 20 or maybe not that many, but quite a few secondary instances. So what we are going to do is essentially cover two parts of this. The first one is working towards a more transparent Git configuration for Geo, so that there is a single URL that connects you automatically to the right Geo node. And the second bit is, and I'll talk about that in a little while, is to improving the web interface experience. But this here, the first part, fully transparent Git configuration, is something that we'll actually tackle for 12.3. If I go to this in a little bit more detail, the problem here is really one of configuration and documentation. So this is something that we believe we can do already, but we want to make it easier for our customers to understand what steps are necessary to allow Geo, for example, to work in conjunction with a Geo-aware DNS service or a Geo-aware load balancer. So this is something that will make configuration much easier, because there's only one URL that you need to actually add to your configuration, and then either a DNS service or a load balancer can figure out what the best Geo node is to actually access. And I think that will make using Geo a lot easier. And so this is one of the items that we're going to tackle for 12.3. The other thing that we are going to do some user research in collaboration with the UX department is to actually understand a little bit more how users are using the secondary and primary web interfaces. And one of the questions that we are trying to answer is if the user experience of the Geo primary web interface is actually acceptable to our users. So that's something we don't know. So the secondary nodes actually expose a read-only web interface. So if you wanted to make a change, you have to go to the primary. And we're interested in understanding if the performance and user experience of the primary web interface is acceptable, because that would allow us to make some choices regarding the future of web UIs on the secondary. So this is really exciting, and we are working on that in 12.3. And depending on the outcomes of that, we may be in a better position to actually make some decisions here. So that's something to also highlight. And I'll close these. So if we look at the roadmap, this is also the reason why we are certain that this epic will expand or extend a little bit further than to 12.3, because based on the user research that we're doing for the 12.3 release in September, based on those findings, we will need to do something after that. We don't quite know what, but that's the spirit of iteration. We'll do a follow-up here. So obviously, the further we are in the future, the more uncertain things get. Then there are two items that I quickly wanted to highlight that are on the way. So there's nothing scheduled yet for 12.3. So they should end by the time of that release. The one is we are looking at simplification of the Geo upgrade process. So this is really in recognition that there's lots of manual steps for upgrading, and we are making some small changes potentially to how the upgrade procedure works, potentially automating some manual interventions, but it's an iterative process, and at the moment we're working on those, and we hope that it makes it easier to actually upgrade. Based on how this goes, we may need to iterate a little bit further, but this is currently ongoing. The same is true for improving object storage. So this is something that we've been working on for a while. So one of our engineers is actually working on enabling replication for content and object storage, which hopefully will be finished by 12.2. So there's no further work in 12.3. So these are those two items here. These here, Geo upgrade and object storage. And lastly, or not lastly, but next, is adding unreplicated data types. And this is quite important for disaster recovery and other reasons. So if we go a little bit more into detail here, We've already done a little bit of work, and this will also become part of the documentation, but I think it's really important to highlight this. Geo replicates some of, or a lot of the data already that is produced by GitLab, but we created actually an overview of all the different data types that are being replicated and that we know about. And as you can see, it's actually a pretty long list. And for the main ones that you may be aware of, so the database, project repository, wikis, we replicate those. But there's actually a number of things that are currently not replicated using Geo. And this is definitely something that we are attempting to change right now, because from our perspective, and I think our customers also agree, it is really important that some of the new features, some of the new things that we do are also then supported by Geo. So if you look at, for example, this table, I believe at the moment we replicate 9 out of 19. So this is definitely something we can get better. And we're already working on this. So one of the things that we're currently doing for 12.2 is looking at custom hooks. But for 12.3, we'll focus on design repositories. So this is something that through the awesome work of one of the groups here at GitLab, we are having design management features right now, which generate design repositories, and I can go a little bit more into detail here. So these are new. They, I believe, are enabled since 12.1. And one of the problem that we're trying to solve here is to ensure that those design repositories that store large assets from various design workflows are also properly replicated using Geo, so that our customers can actually benefit from having those available on secondary nodes. And so there's a bunch of tickets in here that are a little bit too detailed to go into right now, but you can see this is work that we are also scheduling for 12.3. But I think looking at this epic here should give you a good understanding of what we're trying to achieve. And going back to the roadmap. So this year, the design repositories actually belong to the add unreplicated data types. Unfortunately, we can't see the relationship here in the roadmap, but you can imagine these things here belonging together. And then finally, I wanted to also highlight 2 other endeavors that we're going to start pretty soon. So the one is really focusing on the user experience of Geo and understanding how we can make Geo simpler to install. And there's a lot of interesting ideas, and at the moment it is, I think, relatively cumbersome to set up Geo. But we are not in a position right now where we have a good enough understanding of the problem and a good enough understanding of the solution. So what we will do there is in August, and we're starting in August and September, is to really understand, what are the things we can do here, what are the problems for our users, maybe do some user research to tackle this. We expect this will probably extend into the autumn, but that's something we believe is important for you. And then lastly, promotion, demotion, and failover. So this is at the moment a relatively large epic dealing with quite a few different concerns. But one of the problems here for our disaster recovery strategy is really to improve the process for how to actually recover, promote a secondary to a primary, demote, failing over. So there's lots of moving parts here. And I anticipate splitting this into smaller efforts, but similar to the Geo should be simple to install effort. We are attempting here to really do some planning, some user research, understand this, and then update you in the next call on what our progress is. So yeah, if I have to summarize this again, for this item here, automatically choose the Geo node. The issue that I think will deliver a lot of value in 12.3 is the documentation on how to use a single URL. So making Geo essentially play well with a Geo-aware DNS service or something similar. So this is one of the direction items. Then for verification of all replicated data, the 12.3 item that is important to highlight again is the automation effort that we'll undergo. So this is essentially the next iteration after verifying all of the LFS objects, job artifacts. So this one. I think this is great because the better we automate, the easier it will be for everyone to use. So this is another one. And then finally, it is really the Geo support for design repositories. It's a new, interesting, and cool feature that we hope will gain a lot of traction. And we want to make sure that here at Geo, we support those efforts as well. And this is the other item that we are going to push for in 12.3. And there are obviously lots of other issues that are being prepared that we work on. So this is a selection that I thought was interesting and should give you a good idea of what we are doing in 12.3. So that's it from me.